The song we sing, the wise man built his house upon the rock, but the foolish man built his house upon the sand. There's two builders. There's two ways, two trees, and two builders. And the builder who builds on the rock is not only one who says, but also does. And not only one who hears, but also does. You see, we can look past these last several lessons of the Sermon on the Mount, and we can go, wow, what a great sermon that Jesus preached in Matthew 5, 6, and 7. And I think we would all agree it's impactful, it's powerful, it's awesome. But my question is, and his question is, what do you do with it once you hear it? Do you struggle? Do you wrestle with it? When we talk about anger, not merely being something we outward do, but in our hearts, do we struggle with the lust that we talked about in Matthew chapter 5? Have you evaluated your life and said, I have to change, to be renewed, to be transformed, to abide by God's word? See, this is just not a place to be on Sunday morning. The church is just not something to be a part of. This has to be who we are. This has to be what we are. And when I hear words of wisdom growing up, and my parents told me to look both ways before I crossed the street, do you know if I didn't look both ways before I crossed the street, I could be dead in a road? You ever ran out of gas before? I remember being in high school, not having much money to put gas in the car, and my dad telling me, don't ever let it get down before a quarter of a tank. And I remember thinking, that's impossible, until one day I ran out of gas. Man, I wish I would have got that gas gauge fixed. But if I would have never ran it down below a quarter of a tank, guess what wouldn't have never happened? So I had an option, right? I had an option to hear the words of wisdom and put them into action. A wise man will hear these words of Christ. They will hear the words of wisdom that Christ gave in the Sermon on the Mount, and they will allow those words to transform their life. Will you allow his words to transform your life? Will you study through God's word and allow his words to transform your life? Or will you find somebody's words that transforms or allows you to be who you want to be and choose those words to be the words you live by? That's why the way is hard. That's why it's narrow. Because people don't want to live that way. For he says, forever, whoever hears these words of mine and does them will be like the wise man who builds his house on the rock. And life happens. Basically, verse 25, life happens. That's what verse 25 says. Life happens. Rains come, floods came, winds blew, and they beat, and they beat. And listen to me, we've all been beaten. We've all had rains, we've all had floods, we've all had winds. But the one who in their life says these are his words, I'm not only going to hear them, but I'm going to do them. When the wind comes, when the rain falls, and when the floods rise, they're not going to look like those houses that Jed showed you a minute ago. They're going to be built firm. Guys, a standard has been given. And when things are crumbling around us, people need us. We need to be that light that he begins the Sermon on the Mount with. We need to be that salt that people need. The standard has been given by Christ. Words of wisdom. Two ways, two trees, and two builders. So my question this morning is, which foundation are you building on? It's very easy for us to build in the worldly foundation. It's popular. Sometimes it's more comfortable. Sometimes it's more appealing until the rain comes and the winds blow and the floods rise. And at those moments, the life will rise of somebody who's built their foundation on Christ.